Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a radical paradigm shift from our source material that completely turns everything we've been taught about goal setting on its head. You know how we're constantly told that to be successful, you need these massive, ambitious goals? Well, the text we're breaking down today suggests the exact opposite. It argues that obsessing over the finish line is literally setting you up for failure. We're going to explore the psychology of the 1% elite, pulling from Machiavelli, Stoicism, and modern behavioral science, just to see why they operate on a totally different level than the rest of the world. So we have to ask this crucial question right out of the gate to really expose the illusion of goals. Think about it for a second. Every job candidate wants the job, right? Every athlete wants the gold medal. Both the winners and the losers share the exact same finish line in their heads. And as our source material reveals, the true differentiator, it isn't the goal at all. It's the daily routine. The final outcome is completely out of your hands, but your daily actions, your discipline, that is 100% in your control. This brings us to a really stark divide illustrated in the text. Look at the 99% mindset on the left. These folks are chasing that fleeting, cheap dopamine of a final victory. They set a massive goal, get super fired up, and then, 3 days later they quit because that temporary motivation just completely fades away. Now look at the 1% elite mindset on the right. They are not waiting for some magical spark of inspiration. They blindly obey their daily system like it's a strict law. They rely on rigid routines and just ruthless discipline, totally detaching themselves from those intoxicating fantasies of the end result. And this gets pretty deep. Drawing on Machiavellian dark psychology principles, the source actually argues that obsessing over the final victory drains your focus. When you spend all your time just daydreaming about that moment of success, you're essentially wasting your present energy on hollow, unrealistic fantasies. The text makes the case that this constant gap, the space between where you are right now and that massive goal you're dreaming about, is exactly what leads to severe mental depression and total paralysis. To really ground this in modern behavioral science, the text anchors the concept with James Clear's famous rule from Atomic Habits. The argument here is simple but powerful. You have to completely forget the goal and drop down to the level of your daily system. A goal? Well, that just points you in a general direction. But the system, the daily, gritty, repetitive work, that is what actually moves the needle. The source is absolutely insistent on this. If your system is weak, your lofty goals literally mean nothing. And here is where the compounding power of that system really shines. The source points out that by focusing entirely on improving by just 1 measly % a day within a strict routine, you aren't just moving toward a finish line. You're actively rewiring your identity. It's like planting these tiny, underground roots of daily habits that just compound over time. The text suggests that by sticking to this 1% daily improvement, you will transform into a completely different, basically invincible person in exactly 1 year. Now, this next point is fascinating. The text goes right after our modern obsession with feeling inspired, literally calling motivation a total scam. We're told that waiting around for a miraculous burst of energy is just a massive trap. A true monolith, which is how the text describes a transformed elite individual, knows that working when you have absolutely zero desire to do so isn't a struggle. Actually, it's the ultimate sign of true power. According to the source, that exact moment is when the real growth happens. This lines up perfectly with the Stoic wisdom of Marcus Aurelius that's presented in the text. The philosophy here is urging us to treat our morning routine as this unquestionable, uncomplaining force of nature. You don't sit there debating with yourself about whether you feel like working, right? Just like the sun doesn't debate whether it feels like rising in the morning. You simply wake up, do your duty, and complain about absolutely nothing. Okay, moving on to Section 1, the rules of the elite, upgrading to a monolith. Bringing in Robert Greene's 26th law from the 48 Laws of Power, the explainer highlights how a rigid daily system acts as a sort of protective shield. When you operate purely on a system, it keeps your hands clean. It literally saves you from those careless, lazy errors that happen when we make emotional decisions. The system just makes the choices for you, which ultimately protects you from your own worst impulses. To make this happen, the text says you need to construct an impenetrable wall. This is a deeply psychological barrier. What it means is organizing your day so ruthlessly that it actively blocks out all that toxic pressure of getting results, the noise of cheap gossip, and the endless pinging of social media notifications. The whole argument is that when you sit at your desk at the exact same time every single day, your subconscious mind is essentially trained to drop all the excuses. Notice this really stark contrast the text draws between what the masses rely on and what the elite actually use. Motivation is described as this fragile emotion that just evaporates like camphor after 2 days. It is completely unreliable. But ruthless discipline, the source defines that as an iron wall. It's the thing that keeps you standing straight when absolutely everything else around you is falling apart.
Let's jump into Section 2, the Arsenal, Mastering Dark Psychology and Stoicism. Here, we get into the core Stoic and dark psychology strategies from the source. The main idea is that if you can't control your emotions, you're basically just a slave to your circumstances. True freedom equals rigid discipline. The text argues that you've got to fall in love with the boring, repetitive tasks. You have to celebrate isolation, realizing that the path to the very top is always walked alone. And crucially, you need to keep your true intentions entirely secret from the outside world. So how do you actually execute this? The source outlines what it calls the 3 fatal weapons. Number 1, think less. Overthinking minor mistakes just creates mental paralysis, so you simply readjust your system and keep moving. Number 2, talk less. This naturally creates an intimidating psychological aura around you. And number 3, maximum focus. You treat your daily work as your absolute worship. When you lock in and combine these 3 things, you transform into what the text calls a mysterious, unbeatable puzzle. There's a really fascinating strategic use of secrecy highlighted here too. By keeping your daily grind a total secret, you deny people the ability to judge your process. The source uses this super vivid metaphor. When you work in the shadows, your ultimate success strikes the world like a massive shockwave, or as the text puts it, like a falcon suddenly swooping down from the sky. Following Robert Greene's 34th law, the source insists that you must never present yourself as common. Think about it. People subconsciously fear and respect what they can't easily understand. By maintaining royal behavior, which in this context really just means showing up with intense focus, rock-solid emotional control, and silent execution, you essentially demand unspoken respect from everyone around you. So this brings up a great point. How do you handle your detractors? Simple. You don't argue with them. Your deliberate silence acts as a psychological whip. It effortlessly crushes the arrogance of loud, lazy people without you ever having to say a single word. You just let your undeniable results be your only response. All right, let's look at Section 3, the execution, your unbreakable daily system. The source material lays out a very actionable manifesto for us here. First off, it argues that the whole era of writing big, elaborate goals in your diary, that's over. The recommendation is to take immediate action instead. It tells us to ruthlessly filter our environment to completely eliminate the shadows of lazy, negative people. Protecting your peace is an absolute must. Finally, it suggests setting up an internal, strict court where you are the sole, unforgiving judge of your own daily actions. You literally don't need anyone else's validation. Now, the text does warn that as you start implementing the system, people might call you boring or robotic. But it urges you to never feel bad about being ignored or feeling isolated. Because as the source so beautifully notes, cheap things and effortless entertainment are always crowded with people. But priceless, expensive diamonds, they remain hidden alone in the dark, just quietly building their immense value. And that brings us to the end of our analysis. The choice presented by the source material is pretty stark, right? So what's it going to be? Will you keep chasing that fleeting dopamine of empty goals, leaving your success totally up to the whims of temporary motivation? Or will you embrace the boring, repetitive process, kill your excuses, and start building your unstoppable, impenetrable system in the shadows right now? The outcome might be out of your hands, but your system, that starts today.